good evening. Get yourself comfortable, wherever you are, however late it has become. Settle the pillow, let your shoulders drop, and let the day you have just finished slide quietly out of reach. Tonight, we are going somewhere a long way from here. We are going back more than 140 years, into a tall brick house in London, into a life that is going to belong to you for the next few hours. You will not have to do anything. You only have to listen and let the room around you go soft and dark, and let me carry you into it. Here is the question we are going to answer tonight. What did the rules of a Victorian woman's life actually feel like, hour by hour, from the moment she opened her eyes to the moment the last lamp was lowered? Not the rules in the abstract, not a list of do's and don'ts reared out of a dusty manual. The rules as they pressed on a real person, in a real body, in a real house, on an ordinary day when nothing in particular was happening and everything was still governed. Because there is a picture most of us carry of the Victorian lady, and it is worth setting it down here at the start so we can be rid of it. You have probably seen her. She is sitting in a window seat in a pale silk dress that has never known a wrinkle. Her hands are folded. There is embroidery in her lap that she is not really working at. Rain traces the glass beside her, and she watches it with a soft, far-away expression, because she has nothing to do, and nowhere to be, and no thought in her head more pressing than whether it will clear by afternoon. She is decorative. She is idle. She is, in this picture, a kind of ornament that happens to breathe. That is not who you are about to become tonight. That woman never existed. Or rather, she existed only as an image, a thing to be produced and displayed. And the labor of producing her was enormous and constant, and almost entirely hidden. The stillness in that picture is not rest. It is the surface of an immense amount of managed effort, held perfectly level, so that no one can see it move. What we are going to do tonight is look under that surface. We are going to live one full day inside it, and what you will find, I think, is that a woman of this class and this era did not live a life free of work. She lived a life governed by rules, and following those rules was itself the work. It was a full-time occupation, with no wages, no days off, and no visible product except the appearance of ease. There were rules for how she woke and how she washed, rules for what her body was permitted to look like, and how it was shaped to look that way, rules for what she wore in the morning, and what she must change into by the afternoon, and the quiet shame that waited for her if she got it wrong. Rules for who she spoke to first, and who she was allowed to speak to at all, and what subjects she could raise, and which she must let die in the air unmentioned. Rules for how she walked down a street. Rules for how she left a small square of card on a silver tray, and what it meant if she turned down its corner, and what it meant if her call was returned, and what it meant if it was not. Rules for how much she could love her own children out loud, and at what hours she was allowed to see them. Rules written into the law of the land about whether the money she brought to her marriage was still, in any sense, her own. Some of these rules were written down in thick books of household management and etiquette that sold in the hundreds of thousands. Most of them were not written anywhere at all. They lived in the air of a drawing room. They were learned young. absorbed before they could even be named, and enforced not by any court or constable, but by something far more effective, which was the constant, watchful, unsmiling attention of other women who knew the rules exactly as well as you did, and were waiting always to see whether you would keep them. That is the strangeness we're going to sit with tonight. Not strange in the sense of frightening. There is nothing here to trouble you as you drift off. Strange in the older sense, the sense of a world arranged so differently from our own that to step into it is genuinely disorienting. A world where a competent, intelligent, capable adult woman could spend her entire waking life obeying a code she did not write, could master it so completely that she made it look like nothing at all, and could be given no credit for any of it, because the whole point of the performance was that it must never look like a performance. The better she was at the rules, the more invisible her skill became. That is the paradox we are going to hold gently, all night. If this is the sort of thing you find yourself wanting more of, you might let the channel know you're here. A quiet comment, a note that you came by. It genuinely helps these long, slow histories find the other people who are lying awake and looking for exactly this. But there's no hurry about it, and nothing you need to do right now. Right now, your only task is to rest. So let the room where you actually are grow indistinct. Let the edges of it blur, and let us go back together, past your own century entirely, into another one. It is 1878. The place is London. Not the London of factories and river fog and crowded lodging houses, though all of that is out there, close by, pressing against the edges of your world, in ways you will glimpse now and then, through the day. Your London is a particular kind of street in a respectable quarter. A street of tall houses with railings and painted front doors and clean stone steps that someone has already scrubbed this morning before the light was fully up. You do not know the name of the person who scrubbed them. You have never needed to. You are a married woman of what your society would call the comfortable middle class, though the edges of that class blur upward into something grander, and you live, in many ways, by reaching for the manners of the rank just above your own. Your husband is a professional man, a solicitor of standing, with an office in the city and a reputation to keep. His income supports this house, and this house supports his reputation. And you are the one who makes the house do that work. You have children, more than one, up in the nursery at the top of the house, where you will visit them later at the appointed time. You have a small staff, not a great household with a butler and footman and a housekeeper. Nothing so grand as that, but a cook and a housemaid and a nursemaid for the children, and a woman who comes in for the heavy work. 4 women, then, whose days are shaped by yours, and whose management is one of your chief and least visible responsibilities. You are somewhere in your early 30s. You were raised for this. Every skill you have was cultivated toward this exact life, and you perform it well. You are, though no one will ever put it to you this way, and you would not put it to yourself, extremely good at your job. And your job begins in the dark. It is not yet morning as we arrive, not properly. The house is silent and cold, the fires not yet lit in the upstairs rooms, the windows still black. Somewhere below you, the servants have already risen, because the day that will appear seamless to you must be built by other people starting well before you wake. And that too is a rule. though no one calls it one. Soon there will be a knock at your door. A small sound in the dark, discreet and expected. The first move in the long, intricate game of the day. And when it comes, you will open your eyes, and the rules will begin, one after another, in an unbroken sequence, from that first cold moment until the very last lamp is put out tonight. Let us go to that moment now. Let us go to the dark bedroom, and the black window, and the quiet house holding its breath before dawn, and let the whole strange, elaborate, exhausting, and quietly brilliant machinery of your day begin to turn. The knock comes at 6:30. 2 soft raps, no more. And then the sound of the door opening without a request for permission, because the housemaid does not need permission to enter your room, only the discretion to do it quietly. She has been awake for 2 hours already. She has raked out yesterday's ashes downstairs, black-leaded the grate, laid and lit the kitchen fire, carried coal, and now she carries a can of hot water up the back stairs, the metal warm against her forearm, wrapped in a cloth, so it will not scald her, and will not have gone cold by the time she reaches you. You hear her before you see her. You have trained yourself to wake at this exact sound, or rather, the life has trained you, so that now your eyes open in the dark, a moment before the knock, anticipating it. She sets the water down on the washstand. She draws back one curtain, just enough to let the grey come in. If it is a morning in the colder part of the year, she will kneel at your own small bedroom grate and coax a fire into it, working with her back to you, saying nothing beyond a murmured good morning if you speak to her first. Then she withdraws, and for a few minutes you are alone with the day. Consider what has already happened and what it means. It is not yet 7 o'clock, and already the labor of 2 people has gone into the simple fact of warm water waiting for you in a cold room. This is the first thing to understand about a woman of your position, and it is the thing most easily missed. The story told about you, then and now, is that you do nothing, that you are decorative and idle, kept behind glass like something fragile, and it is true that you will not carry the coal yourself, and true that you will not empty the basin. But the arrangement that puts warm water at your side at 6:30 did not arrange itself. Someone hired that housemaid, sets her hours, knows what she is paid and whether she is honest, and how she is getting on, and decides each week whether the household can afford the coal being burned. That someone is you. The idleness is the performance. The management is the work, and it has already started before you have so much as sat up. So sit up now into the cold. The fire, if there is one, has not yet warmed the room. Your breath is faintly visible. You put your feet to the floor, and here is the first rule of the body, though you would never name it as a rule, because it is simply how a person of sense behaves. You do not linger. You do not lie abed. Lying abed is what invalids do, and what the idle rich of a coarser sort do, and what a woman of your careful respectability does not do, because the whole moral architecture of your class rests on industry, on rising, on being about your business even when your business is invisible. The servants are up. To be found still sleeping when the household is in motion would be a small disgrace, felt more by you than remarked by anyone, but felt nonetheless. You go to the washstand. The water is still warm. There is no bathroom, as you would understand the word. No room given over to a great porcelain tub with taps, not in most houses of your kind in this year. There is this: a marble-topped stand, a wide basin, a jug, a smaller ewer, soap in a dish, and towels folded over a rail. You wash at the basin, standing in the cold, quickly and thoroughly. You wash your face and your neck and your hands and your arms, and the rest of you in sections, sponging with a flannel, because to be clean is a moral quality as much as a physical one, and a lady is clean. The soap is a hard, plain, honest soap, scented lightly if you are fortunate. The whole business is brisk. There is nothing luxurious about it. Warmth and leisure are not what the morning wash provides. What it provides is the daily reaffirmation that you are a person who keeps herself in good order. And being in good order is the ground on which everything else you do will stand. Then your hair. You slept with it in a loose plait, and now you unbind it, and here it is, all of it, longer than a stranger would ever see it, falling past your shoulders, past your waist perhaps. Long hair is expected of you. To cut it would be extraordinary, nearly scandalous, a thing done only in illness. So it grows, and it must be dealt with every single morning, and dealing with it is a labor in itself. You brush it out. You will, in a little while, put it up, but not yet, not before you are dressed, because the order of the morning is fixed, and hair comes near the end of it. Because before the hair, before the dress, before anything the world will see, comes the part of the morning the world is expressly forbidden to see. Comes the layering of the body. And this is where we must slow down, because this is the part most thoroughly misunderstood, and the part that most reveals how completely the rules of your era reach inward, past the dress, past the skin almost, to the shape of the body itself. You do not simply put on clothes. You construct a self layer by layer in a fixed order, and each layer has a name and a purpose and a set of rules attached to it. The first layer, against your skin, is the chemise, a simple garment, loose, of white cotton or linen, falling to somewhere around the knee, plain or edged with a little modest trimming. It has one great practical purpose, and understanding it explains a great deal about everything that follows. Your outer clothes, your dresses, are precious. They are expensive. They are difficult to clean. Some of them can scarcely be washed at all without ruin. But the human body, worn against cloth all day, soils it, and so the chemise sits between your body and everything valuable, taking the wear, taking the soil, being itself the thing that is washed, boiled, scrubbed, and worn thin and replaced, so that the costly layers above it need be laundered far less often. The chemise is a barrier. It protects the investment. Everything about the way you dress, you will find, comes back sooner or later to money. And this humble first garment is where it begins. Over the chemise, or with it, come the drawers. 2 legs, open or closed, depending on the fashion and the practicality of the year, tied or buttoned at the waist, white, plain, purely functional, and never ever spoken of. And over these, before the shaping begins, sometimes a fitted under bodice, or a further light layer, depending on the season and your habits. Now pause on all of this, because here is the point. Consider how many garments you have put on, and consider that not one of them will be seen by another living soul, except the maid who helps you and the laundress who washes them. All this careful cloth, this construction, this daily labor of dressing and undressing, exists beneath the visible woman entirely. There is an enormous amount of you that is private, structured, and governed by rule, and none of it shows. That is not an accident. That is the deep logic of the whole system you live inside. The visible surface, the dress, the face, the arranged hair, that is the part offered to the world. Beneath it is a whole hidden architecture, and the maintenance of that architecture is constant, and the world is meant to believe it does not exist. You are meant to appear as though you simply are this way, as though the shape and the smoothness and the cleanliness are natural to you, arrived at without effort. The effort is real and daily, and largely secret, and being made to hide the effort is itself one of the oldest and strangest rules you live by. The body is never simply left alone. That is the thing to hold on to. There is no state, from the moment you rise to the moment you lie down, in which your body is unshaped, unmanaged, its own. Even asleep it wore the loose plait and the nightgown that are their own kind of correctness. Waking, it passes immediately into the hands of ritual, washed by rule, layered by rule, and about to be, in the next stage of the morning, laced and bound into the shape your world requires a respectable woman to hold. The maid returns. She has knocked again, softly, and come in, and now the two of you begin the real work of the morning together, in a wordless coordination, worn smooth by repetition. She knows the order. You know the order. Neither of you needs to speak much. She hands you what comes next. She holds and lifts and fastens where you cannot reach. There is an intimacy here that the rules of your class permit in this one narrow context and nowhere else. The intimacy of another woman's hands on your body, dressing you, and it passes without comment, because it is not intimacy as you would name it between equals. It is service. She is a person doing her work, and her work happens to be the daily reconstruction of you. And so you stand in the cold grey light of not quite morning, half-built, the chemise and the drawers, and the plain warm layers already in place, your hair still loose down your back, the water cooling in the basin, and you wait for her to bring the next thing, the garment that more than any other will decide how you hold yourself, how you breathe, how you sit and bend and turn for the whole of the long day ahead. The garment that takes the soft, ordinary, private shape of you and makes it into the upright, controlled, correct silhouette that the world outside this room will accept as a lady. It waits over her arm, pale and boned and laced, and in a moment she will bring it to you, and the shaping will begin. She brings it to you the way she brings everything, without ceremony. And yet this garment is not like the others. You turn your back to her, without being asked, because this too is part of the order worn smooth by repetition, and you feel the cool weight of it settle against your body over the chemise. It is not soft. That is the first thing anyone who has never worn one fails to understand. The chemise beneath is soft. The drawers are soft. But this thing is structured, deliberate, a piece of engineering laid against the trunk of you, and it has a shape of its own that is not yet your shape, and the next several minutes are the negotiation between the two. The maid takes the laces at the back. She begins at the top, or perhaps at the waist, and works outward, depending on the cut, drawing the two edges of the garment toward each other by degrees. You feel the first pull, gentle, and you settle your weight, and let your shoulders drop. You have learned, over years of this, exactly how to stand. Feet a little apart, one hand resting on the edge of the washstand or the bedpost for balance. Breath let out slowly, so there is nothing to fight against. She pulls again, and the boning presses inward along your ribs and down over your hips, and you feel yourself gathered, contained, drawn upward, as if a hand had taken you gently by the spine and asked you to be taller. This is worth slowing down for, because the garment against your body right now is one of the most misunderstood objects in all of history, and most of what you have heard about it is wrong. It is built first around a busk, a long, flat strip running down the center front, made of steel by this decade, though earlier ones used wood or whalebone. And in your corset, it fastens with small studs and loops, so it can be opened at the front without unlacing the back entirely. That busk is what keeps the front of you straight and unbending. Radiating out from it, sewn into narrow channels in the fabric, are the bones, dozens of them in a good corset, thin strips of steel or of baleen, that flexible material taken from the mouths of whales, which the whole trade calls whalebone, though it is not bone at all. Each strip is set into its own casing, so that the garment can curve where your body curves, and hold firm where it must hold firm. The whole thing is made of 2 or 3 layers of stout cotton or linen coutil, a weave so tight and dense it will not stretch, and it is shaped not by cutting flat cloth into a tube, but by seaming many curved panels together, gauze let in over the hips and the bust, so that a flat set of pieces becomes a 3-dimensional thing fitted to a particular woman. A corset of decent quality costs somewhere between 6 and 12 shillings ready-made, more if it is made to your measure by a stay-maker, and it does not last forever. The fabric wears, the boning works loose or snaps, the busk bends, and a woman who wears one every day of her life will replace it perhaps once or twice a year. Set that beside what the maid lacing you into it earns, and the arithmetic tells its own quiet story. Her wages might run to 14 or 16 pounds in the year, paid quarterly, with her room and her board on top. A single good corset, then, is not nothing even to you, and to her it would be a real consideration, a thing to be saved for and cared for and mended rather than replaced. You have several. You have a morning one, plainer and more comfortable, and better ones for the afternoon and evening. And this is itself a small fact about class, that a woman of your standing owns more than one garment for a purpose a working woman would meet with a single, hard-worn item. Now, the pulling, this is where the fear lives. In the minds of people who have never done it, the image of a woman hauled breathless into an impossible smallness while a servant braces a knee against her back. Set that image down. It belongs to caricature and to a handful of extreme cases, not to your mourning. The lacing you are receiving right now is firm, but it is not violence. The garment supports the weight of your bosom, holds your back straight through a day of sitting and standing and bending over accounts, and gives your outer clothes their smooth line. And for all these purposes it must be snug, but it need not and does not crush. You can breathe. You are breathing now, a little higher in the chest than you would if you were naked, drawing air into the upper part of your lungs rather than deep into the belly. And this shallower way of breathing is simply how you have breathed for most of your waking hours since you were a girl. It has become your body's ordinary manner. You do not notice it any more than you notice the weight of your own hair. The maid ties off the laces at the small of your back, tucks the ends away, and steps around to look at you from the front, checking that the busk sits straight and the top edge lies flat. You breathe out, test the fit with a small turn of the waist, and it holds you the way it should, upright and gathered and correct. And here is the rule, unwritten but absolute, that this garment serves. A respectable woman does not present the world with the loose, soft, natural shape of her own body. That shape belongs to the bedroom and the sickbed, and to no one else. In every setting where she may be seen, at breakfast with her own children, at the door receiving a caller, in the street, in the shop, at another woman's dinner table, she must be contained, upright and smooth, her outline controlled and her posture held. A woman who let herself go slack, who sat with a rounded back, or whose figure spread unshaped beneath her dress, would be read at a glance, not merely as untidy, but as loose in a deeper sense, careless of herself, unrespectable. The corset is the daily instrument by which that reading is prevented. It is armor against being misjudged. You submit to it not because a man demands it in the moment, but because the whole apparatus of what a woman is worth has decided, long before you woke this morning, what shape you are permitted to be. With the corset set, the building continues upward and outward. Over it come the petticoats, and there is an order to these too. A woman does not simply put on a dress. She puts on the underpinnings that will give the dress its intended line, and in this decade the line has moved. The great cage crinoline of 20 years ago, that vast bell of hooped steel, has collapsed and drawn back and gathered itself behind you into the bustle. So the fullness now sits at the back, and the front of the skirt falls comparatively straight. You have a small, structured support tied at your waist to hold that back fullness, and over it the petticoats. 1, 2, sometimes more, plain flannel for warmth beneath, and a whiter, finer one above to keep the shape clean. The maid settles each in turn, smoothing and tying, and with every layer you grow heavier and more architectural, less a woman standing in a cold room, and more a structure being assembled to specification. And then the dress. This one is your morning dress, and that phrase carries the weight of a whole system you were born into, and have never once questioned aloud. Because clothing in your world does not merely cover you or flatter you. It announces the hour of the day and the nature of the occasion. And to be dressed wrongly for either is a small public failure that others will notice and quietly file away. The morning dress is high to the throat and long in the sleeve, plainer in its trimming, made of a serviceable wool or a printed cotton. A garment meant for the house, for the domestic hours, for family, and the giving of orders, and the writing of letters. It is decent, comfortable within the limits of decency, and modest almost to severity. No woman of sense would receive her morning callers, let alone sit down to dinner in such a thing. That would come later, when the whole edifice you are now building would be taken down again and rebuilt in something finer. Consider what that means as a rule of life. It is not enough to be clothed. You must be clothed appropriately to the clock, and the clock of your day is divided into phases, each with its own correct dress. The morning has its dress. The afternoon of calls and visits has another, more elaborate, with the sleeves and the neckline adjusted to the greater formality of being seen by people who are not your family. The evening, if there is company, demands another still, cut lower, made of silk or fine fabric, trimmed and jeweled. To appear in a morning gown at an afternoon call would mark you as ignorant or careless. To appear in evening dress in the morning would be absurd, a kind of costume error that suggests you do not understand the world you move in. And the changing itself is labor, real labor, the whole apparatus of corset and petticoats, and dress undone and done up again, requiring time and requiring the maid twice, or even 3 times in a single day. The great social fiction is that you do nothing, but simply meeting the rule that says you must be correctly dressed for each phase of the day consumes hours and the work of another woman's hands, and it is only the first of the day's rules, and the day has barely begun. The maid steps back. You are at last dressed for the morning. The soft, loose shape of you that lay under the blankets an hour ago has been contained, straightened, layered, and finished, made into something the world will accept without a second glance, which is precisely the point, that all this construction should read as nothing, as simply how a lady naturally looks. You turn once, and the boning holds you, and the skirt falls in its proper line, and your breath sits high and even in your chest as it has since childhood. There is a mirror, and you glance into it, and what looks back is not a woman who has just spent the better part of an hour being assembled. It is a lady, upright and correct and ready, betraying no sign of the effort her own appearance has cost. And downstairs, the household is stirring, and the first of the day's obligations that require you to be seen is already waiting at the breakfast table, where another set of rules entirely will be observed before you have taken so much as a cup of tea. The breakfast room faces east, and at this hour it holds what little light the London morning offers, thin and grey through the tall windows, filtered further by the smoke that hangs over the whole city and never entirely lifts. It is a smaller room than the dining room where guests are received, more private, meant only for the family, and it has its own particular warmth this morning from the fire that the housemaid laid and lit before you came down, before, in fact, most of the house was awake. The table is already set. The cloth is clean and white and pressed. There is a smell of coffee and of toast and of the bacon kept warm under a silver cover on the sideboard. And there is the smaller, sharper smell of the fire. And all of it together makes the room feel for a moment like a place of ease. It is not a place of ease. It is a place with rules, and you know every one of them, and you begin observing them the instant you cross the threshold. Your husband is already seated. He is a professional man, a solicitor of some standing, and his day begins with the newspaper, which he holds open before him and reads while he eats. And this too is a rule, though not one anybody would name as such. He may read at the table, he may absent himself behind the paper into the affairs of the wider world, the markets and the courts, and the doings of Parliament, and no one will think it discourteous. You may not. A lady does not read at the breakfast table. Her attention belongs to the room, to the smooth running of the meal, to the children when they are brought down, to whatever her husband may wish to say when he lowers the paper for a moment. His attention may travel outward. Yours must remain here, gathered and available, ready to be needed. You take your place at the foot of the table, and the housemaid pours your tea, and you begin the quiet management of the meal that will look to anyone watching like nothing at all. Consider the order of things at this table, because the order is itself a rule, and it is not accidental. Your husband is served first, or serves himself first, from the covered dishes, according to the custom of the house. He is the head, and precedence flows from him. Then you. Then, if they are present, the children, though the very young ones, do not eat here at all, but upstairs in the nursery, and are brought down only briefly, dressed and clean and quiet, to be seen by their father before he leaves, and then taken away again. There is a rule governing children at the table as strict as any other. They are to be present but not prominent. They do not speak unless spoken to. They do not reach, do not interrupt, do not make demands, and a child who cannot yet manage this simply does not appear. The Victorian breakfast room is not a scene of family chatter. It is a hierarchy, arranged in miniature around a white cloth, and everyone in it knows their exact place within it. The children come down now, the two eldest, walking carefully in the way children walk when they have been told a great many times how to walk. They wish their father good morning. He lowers the paper and looks at them over it and says something kind and brief. And then they come to you, and you touch a cheek and ask a small question and receive a small answer, and the whole exchange lasts perhaps 2 minutes before the nurse, who has waited just outside the door, gathers them again and takes them back upstairs to their own breakfast, which is plainer than yours and eaten at a different hour under different rules. You watch them go. This measured, scheduled, brief affection is the correct form, and you learned it as a child yourself at a table much like this one, and it does not occur to you, most mornings, that it could be arranged any other way. Here is something worth slowing down for, because it is easy to look at this table and see only comfort, and to miss what the comfort actually costs, and who pays for it. Everything on this table has a price, and the prices were fought over, in a manner of speaking, in the kitchen and at the tradesmen's doors, and every one of them is written down somewhere in your hand. The tea in your cup is not a small thing. Even in 1878, with prices lower than they had been in your mother's girlhood, tea is a considered purchase, bought by the pound and locked away. And the good tea, the tea you would serve to a caller, costs perhaps 2 or 3 shillings the pound, which is real money in a house that counts its money carefully, as every respectable house does. Sugar likewise. Coffee more still. The bread is baked at home or bought from the baker, and the butter and the bacon and the eggs come from the tradesmen whose books you settle, and the whole of the family's eating for a household of your kind might run to £1 or more each week, sometimes considerably more, out of an income that must also clothe you all, and house you, and pay the servants, and keep up the appearance on which your husband's professional standing partly rests. And set against all this, set against the tea and the sugar and the covered dishes of a single family breakfast, is what the people who prepared it earn. The housemaid who laid this fire and pressed this cloth, and now stands ready at the sideboard, is paid perhaps 12 or 14 pounds in a year, with her room and her board, which is to say a few shillings a week in actual coin. The cook earns more, being skilled, perhaps 20 or 25 pounds in the year, and she is the most valuable servant in the house and knows it. A single good dinner party, the kind you will give this very evening, can cost in food and wine and extra hands what the housemaid earns in a month of her life. These are not figures anybody says aloud at the breakfast table, but they are the true architecture of the room, and you, who keep the accounts, are one of the few people in the house who sees the whole of it at once. When the meal is nearly finished, and your husband has folded his paper and gone to prepare for the day, the cook comes up to you, or you go down to her, according to the custom of the house. And here is the part of the morning that requires the most delicate handling of all, though it will look, again, like nothing. You give the orders for the day. What is to be eaten, and when, and for how many? And this evening in particular, there is the dinner to be settled, the courses to be agreed, the marketing to be discussed. And you do this as the mistress of the house, with the authority the position gives you, over a woman who has cooked for 30 years and knows more about the roasting of a joint and the raising of a sauce than you will ever know or are expected to know. This is the strange balance of it. You command, and she obeys, because the rule of the household places you above her without question. And yet the actual knowledge, the real skill of the thing being commanded, lives in her hands and not yours. A wise mistress understands this exactly, and manages the cook the way a wise employer manages any expert, by setting the ends and leaving the means, by suggesting rather than dictating where the cook's own judgment is better than her own, and by never ever letting the household see daylight between them. The authority must appear absolute even where it is, in practice, a careful partnership. So you settle the dinner, you name the dishes, and the cook, if she has a better thought, offers it in the form of a question, and you accept it as though it were your own idea. And the thing is arranged, and neither of you would ever describe what just happened as a negotiation, though that is precisely what it was. This is the shape of your whole position in the house, made visible in a single morning conversation. There is a chain of authority, and you sit near the top of it, below your husband, and above everyone else who lives and works under this roof. The cook answers to you. The housemaid answers to the cook in some matters, and to you in others. The nurse answers to you in all that concerns the children. If the house is grand enough to have a butler or a housekeeper, then the lines run differently again. But the principle holds. You are the manager. You direct the labor of several people. You hold the accounts. You make the daily decisions on which the smooth running of the whole establishment depends. And you carry in your head, at every moment, a working knowledge of the stores, the money, the calendar of social obligation, and the temperament of every servant you employ. And the rule, the great and defining rule of your class, is that all of this management must be invisible. It must not look like work, because a lady does not work. It must look like ease, like natural grace, like a house that simply runs of its own accord around a woman who does nothing more strenuous than pour her own tea and touch her children's cheeks and wish her husband a good day. The competence is real. The labor of thought and coordination that goes into a single ordinary morning is real and considerable. But the entire performance is designed to conceal exactly that, to present the result while erasing all trace of the effort. In precisely the same way, your own dressed body an hour ago was made to read as nature, rather than as an hour's construction. The house, like the corset, holds its shape because someone is working, unseen, to hold it. And the someone, more often than anyone will ever say, is you. The cook goes back down to her kitchen with the day's orders. The housemaid clears the table. Your husband has gone. The breakfast room, so full a few minutes ago of family and food and quiet ceremony, empties around you, and the fire settles, and the grey light shifts a little as the morning wears on toward the middle of itself. And your day, which the world insists is a day of leisure, moves now to its next set of obligations. There are letters waiting to be written, and accounts waiting to be entered, and the whole apparatus of correspondence that a woman of your position is expected to keep, each piece of it governed by rules as exact as those that governed the table you have just left. You rise and smooth your skirt and go to find the writing desk, where the ink and the paper and the small, unforgiving rules of a lady's hand are all ready waiting for you. The writing desk sits by the window in the morning room, and it is one of the few pieces of furniture in the house that is unquestionably yours. Not the drawing room, which belongs to the household and to whoever calls. Not the dining room, which belongs to the evening and its performances. This small desk, with its slope of leather and its cluster of little drawers and pigeonholes, is where a great deal of the day's real work happens, and almost none of it will ever be called work. You sit. The light through the window is thin and even, the best light for close work, which is why the desk was placed here in the first place. In front of you, the tools of the morning are arranged as they are arranged every day. A standish holding 2 inkwells, one black and one red, a tray of pens, a stick of sealing wax, and a small brass seal, a sheet of blotting paper already ghosted with the reversed impressions of yesterday's letters, and 2 stacks of paper, one for the accounts and one for the correspondence, because the morning holds both, and neither can be neglected. You reach first for the account book, because it is best done while the mind is fresh, and before the day's callers can interrupt. It is a plain-bound ledger, ruled into columns, and it is one of the most honest documents in the entire house. Whatever the drawing room says about ease, and whatever the dinner table says about plenty, this book tells the truth in shillings and pence. You open it to yesterday's page, and begin to enter what was spent. The butcher's boy came, and the meat is recorded. 2 shillings and 4pence for the joint. The fishmonger, 1 shilling and 9pence. The greengrocer, a few pence for greens, and a shilling for the fruit that will go on the table tonight. Milk, delivered daily, entered by the week. The candles bought at the chandler's. The soap, the starch, the blacking for the grates. Each small purchase written in your own hand in its own column, and each column carried down and totaled, so that at the end of the week, and the end of the month, and the end of the quarter, you can say exactly, to the penny, where the money went. Here is something worth slowing down for, because this ledger is doing more than it appears to. A woman of your position is not merely permitted to keep the household accounts. She is expected to, and judged on it, and the standard she is judged by is thrift. The great domestic manuals of the age, the ones every mistress of a house owned, or meant to own, are relentless on this point. Waste is not merely a financial failing, it is a moral one. A wife who lets money slip through the household unaccounted is a wife who has failed at the one economic duty the age has assigned her. And the failure will be read as a failure of character, not of arithmetic. So you count the eggs and the lumps of sugar and the ends of candle, not because you are poor, for you are not, but because the counting itself is a virtue you are required to practice and to be seen practicing. And the sums matter because the margins are real. Your husband allots a fixed amount for the housekeeping, handed over at intervals, and out of it must come the food, the smaller wages, the coal, the cleaning, the endless minor repairs and replacements that a household of this size consumes without ever seeming to. If you overspend, you must go to him and explain, and the explaining is its own small humiliation, a reminder that the money was never yours. If you underspend, if you manage the thing cleverly, the saved remainder is a quiet triumph you may not even be able to name aloud, because to boast of it would be to admit how much thought the managing took. Consider the scale of what a single line in this book represents. The joint of meat at 2 and 4 is a morning's wage, near enough, for the housemaid who cleared your breakfast table. A girl who earns perhaps 12 or 14 pounds in a year, paid quarterly, with her board and lodging found. The bottle of good wine your husband likes with his dinner costs more than she is paid in a week. You are not cruel, and you do not think of it in those terms as you write the figures down. But the ledger holds both truths on the same page, whether you think of them or not. And a woman who keeps such a book for years cannot help but absorb, somewhere below the level of speech, exactly what things cost, and exactly what people are held to be worth. You blot the page and close the book, and turn to the correspondence, and here a different set of rules takes over. Because the letters are not simply written, they are performed in ink, and the paper itself is part of the performance. The sheet you draw toward you is good, but not showy. Cream of a decent weight, with your address engraved at the head, because a lady of your standing does not write on cheap, thin paper any more than she would receive callers in her nightgown. The manuals are clear on this too. Colored paper, scented paper, paper that is too ornate. All of it is vulgar. The correct choice is quality that does not announce itself, and the whole art of your class lies in exactly that, in the expensive thing that has the grace not to look expensive. And then the hand itself. Your handwriting was drilled into you as a girl, hour upon hour of copybook and correction, until it settled into the even, sloping, legible script that a lady is expected to produce. Your spelling must be perfect. Your grammar must be correct. A single misspelt word, a blot, a crossing out, is not a small thing. It is evidence, and the person who receives your letter will read the evidence and draw conclusions about your education and your breeding, and by extension, your husband's judgment in marrying you. The letter says what its words say, but the paper and the hand and the very neatness of the lines say something else underneath, something about who you are, and where you belong. And everyone who matters knows how to read the second message as fluently as the first. You have 2 letters to write this morning, and they could hardly be more different. And yet each is governed by its own fixed and unforgiving form. The first is an invitation. You are asking another lady and her husband to dine, and there is a correct way to do it and 100 incorrect ways. The invitation is written in the third person, always, a small formality that keeps a polite distance around even a warm friendship. You request the pleasure of their company. You name the day and the hour. You do not gush. You do not explain. You do not apologize for the shortness of the notice or promise a fine evening, because to do any of that would be to try too hard, and trying too hard is itself a fault. The invitation is a small closed box of a thing, correct on every side, giving nothing away. The second letter is harder, and you sit with the pen unmoving over the paper for a moment before you begin it. It is a note of condolence. A woman you know slightly has lost a member of her family, and the rules require that you write, and they require almost as strictly what you may and may not say. You may express your sympathy. You may speak briefly and with restraint of the person who has gone. You may offer, in the mildest and least intrusive terms, to be of use. What you may not do is dwell or dramatize or reach for large feeling, because the register of grief itself is regulated, and a condolence that strains for effect is as much a breach as a blot on an invitation. The kindest thing and the most correct thing are, in this case, the same thing, which is to write briefly, sincerely, and then to stop. Here is a detail easy to miss from a distance. There are things that may be said, and things that may never, under any circumstances, be committed to paper at all. A letter can be kept. A letter can be shown to a third person, read aloud, produced years later, and so the whole art of a lady's correspondence includes a constant, half-conscious editing, a sense of what is safe to write and what must only ever be spoken, in a low voice, in a room with the door closed. Anything touching money too frankly, anything touching a quarrel, anything that could be turned against you or against your husband if the wrong eyes fell on it, all of that stays out of the ink. You learned this the way you learned everything else, not from a single lesson, but from 1,000 small corrections, until the caution became a part of your hand, and now you no longer even feel yourself doing it. You finish the condolence. You read it back once, slowly, checking not the feeling, but the form, because the form is what will be judged. Then the invitation, folded, and the little ritual of the wax. You hold the stick to the flame of the small spirit lamp kept for the purpose. Let a bead of it fall onto the join, and press the brass seal down into the soft red before it cools. The seal leaves its clean impression, and the letter is closed and sealed, and ready for the servant to carry or the post to take. 2 letters, perhaps 20 minutes of work. And in those 20 minutes, you have practiced 6 distinct disciplines, the arithmetic of the accounts still fresh behind them, the choice of paper, the control of the hand, the management of your own feeling into the exact shape the occasion permits, the constant editing of what may and may not be said. None of it will be called labor. If your husband were asked how you spent your morning, he might say, if he thought about it at all, that you wrote a few letters and looked over the books, as though it were nothing, as though the pen moved itself, you set the sealed letters on the corner of the desk, where the servant will find them. And you cap the inkwell, and you sit for just a moment in the thin, clear light of the window, with the 2 stacks of paper reduced now to 1. Somewhere below you, a door opens and closes. A tradesman, perhaps, at the area, steps. The morning is settling into its middle hours, the quiet, productive stretch before the calls begin. And you know, because you know the shape of every day like this one, that the quiet will not last. Already on a small silver tray, somewhere in the front of the house, the first cards of the day may be arriving. And here it comes. The knock is soft, and the door opens, and the parlour-maid enters with a small silver tray held level in both hands, the way she has been taught to hold it, and on the tray lie 3 cards. She does not speak beyond the necessary words. She sets the tray at your elbow and waits, because there may be an instruction, and then withdraws when she sees there is not. 3 small rectangles of stiff white pasteboard. To anyone outside this world, they would mean nothing at all. To you, they are a set of messages as precise as anything you have just written and sealed at your desk. And reading them correctly is a skill you have spent your whole life acquiring, without ever being told you were learning it. This is worth slowing down for, because the calling card system is one of those elaborate machines the Victorian upper and middle classes built for themselves. And once you understand how it worked, you understand a great deal about how the whole society was held together. A card was a small piece of pasteboard, usually somewhere around 3 inches by 2, printed or engraved with a name. A lady's card carried her name in the form of her husband's, so that a married woman appears on her own card as Mrs. Edward somebody, her own given name nowhere on it, her identity folded entirely into his. The card was left when a call was paid, and the paying and leaving of calls was not a casual social pleasantry. It was the mechanism by which acquaintance was made, maintained, tested, and ended. Look at the 3 cards on your tray. 1 is folded, the top left corner turned down, and that turned corner is not an accident or a careless bend. It tells you the lady called in person, rather than sending a servant with the card. A corner turned this way says one thing, a corner turned that way says another, and the whole card, folded down the middle, says the call was meant for every lady of the household, not for you alone. The women who used this system read these small foldings the way you read a sentence. A servant carrying a stack of cards on his mistress's behalf leaves them flat and unturned. A lady who has climbed down from her own carriage and stood at your door leaves the mark of her own hand in that turned corner. The difference matters. It is the difference between a message sent and a visit attempted. Now consider what these cards oblige you to do, because that is the part that makes the system a labor rather than a courtesy. A call must be returned. If a lady of roughly your own standing leaves a card, you are bound within a reasonable interval, a few days, a week at most, to call in return or to send your own card back. To fail to return, a call is not neutral. It is a statement. It says, without a single word being spoken or written, that you do not wish to continue the acquaintance. And so the tray of cards is really a tray of small debts, each one requiring settlement, each one to be entered somewhere in your memory, or in the little book some women kept for exactly this purpose, so that no debt is overlooked, and no unintended insult is given. There is a strict order to who calls on whom first, and it runs along the lines of rank. The newer arrival to a neighborhood waits to be called upon by the established resident. The person of lower social standing does not call first upon the person of higher standing and expect to be received. To present yourself uninvited, out of your proper order, is to risk the quiet humiliation of not being admitted at all. And so the whole system encodes the hierarchy of the society in a sequence of pasteboard. Everyone knowing their place in the queue. Everyone waiting for the card that signals they may proceed. The rule that governs the call itself, once a lady is actually admitted to your drawing room, is nearly as fixed as the cards. A morning call, and here the word morning is one of those small traps the era laid for the unwary, because a morning call in fact took place in the early afternoon. After luncheon and before dinner, a morning call is short. 15 minutes is the understood length. A quarter of an hour. You do not remove your bonnet. You do not take off your gloves. You do not settle in as though you mean to stay, because settling in is precisely what you must not do. The outer things stay on to announce that you are a visitor passing through, that you understand the visit is brief by its nature, that you will not overstay and burden your hostess. To keep your bonnet on is a courtesy. To take it off is nearly a threat. So picture it now. The parlour-maid returns, because one of these callers has done more than leave a card. One has asked whether you are at home. That phrase, at home, is another of the era's small fictions, because whether you are at home has almost nothing to do with whether you are physically within the walls of the house. You are quite obviously in the house. At home means available to receive, willing to be seen, and a lady not wishing to receive callers simply instructs her servant to say she is not at home, and the caller understands perfectly, and leaves a card and goes, and no one is deceived, and no one is offended, because the fiction is understood by all parties as a fiction. But today, you are at home, and the caller the maid announces is a woman of higher standing than yourself, the wife of a man of greater fortune and older family, a woman whose acquaintance is worth keeping and whose good opinion carries weight in the small world you both move in. She has shown up. You rise. And now begins a performance that will last precisely 15 minutes and will require every ounce of the training you have been describing all morning. You greet her with warmth that must appear entirely natural and is, in fact, carefully measured. You are pleased to see her, and you must show yourself pleased, but not so effusively as to seem to be reaching above yourself, not so eagerly as to betray that you know exactly how much her call is worth to you. She sits. You sit. The maid may bring something small, though in a call this brief often nothing is taken at all. And you talk. Here is where the deference and the intimacy and the rank all operate at once, in the same small room, in the same light conversation. And this is the thing about these interactions that is genuinely difficult to hold in the mind, because we tend to imagine that a relationship is one thing, either warm or cold, either equal or unequal. This one is all of them together. You defer to her in the ordering of the talk, in who introduces a subject and who follows it. In the small verbal courtesies, you acknowledge that she stands above you, And yet the conversation must also carry a real thread of intimacy, of two women who know each other's households and children and troubles, who can speak with a warmth that is not merely formal. And underneath both of those, quite steadily, runs the awareness on both sides of exactly what each is worth to the other, what this acquaintance provides, what it costs, whether it is rising or cooling. You perform ease you do not feel. Your ankles ache faintly, still from standing at the accounts, and there is a note of condolence you have written this morning that sits somewhere in the back of your mind, and the cook is waiting for a decision about the fish. And none of this may show. Your face must offer nothing but pleasant, unhurried attention. You must have opinions ready that are agreeable without being empty, informed without being forward. You must ask after her family in the correct order and to the correct degree. You must not, under any circumstances, let the visit run long, and so some quiet part of you is counting, is measuring the minutes against the 15 you are allowed, is watching for the natural place to let her rise and take her leave without either of you appearing to have hurried it. And then she rises. The quarter hour has passed, or nearly, and she gathers herself, and you rise with her, and there is a small ritual of leave-taking, and she is shown down, and the door closes, and the performance is over, and you may sit again, and let your face go slack for a moment in the empty room. Consider what has just happened. In 15 minutes of light talk, you have maintained an acquaintance that supports your husband's standing and your children's prospects. You have communicated entirely through manner that you know your place in the order, and keep it gracefully. You have gathered whatever small intelligence the conversation offered about who is calling on whom, whose daughter is to be married, whose fortunes are rising, and whose are quietly not. You have done a piece of work that is indistinguishable to any observer from doing nothing at all. Two women sat in a drawing room and talked pleasantly for a quarter of an hour. That is what it looked like. What it was is the maintenance of the entire social position of a family, conducted by its women, unpaid, unnamed, and understood by no one to be work. And the cards remain. The 3 on the tray, and now hers added to them. Each one still owed a return. Each one to be remembered and settled in its turn. Tomorrow, or the day after, you will have your own carriage brought round, or you will walk with a servant, and you will go and leave your cards at the doors of these women in the proper order, turning the corner with your own hand where a call was paid in person, sending the servant ahead where a card alone will do. And they, in their houses, will read your cards as you have read theirs, and enter the small debt as paid. And the machine will turn over once more, as it turns every day in every drawing room in this part of the city, silent, exact, and utterly relentless. You cap nothing and seal nothing now. You simply sit for a breath in the quiet the caller has left behind, the tray with its 4 cards at your elbow, the light past its earliest sharpness now, and you gather yourself because the morning is not finished. There is the going out still to come, the leaving of your own cards, the streets to be crossed, and there are rules for that too. Rules about where you may go, and when, and in whose company, as strict in their way as anything the drawing room has asked of you. You reach for the bell to call the maid, and you begin already to think about what you will wear to be seen. The maid comes, and the dressing to go out begins. And it is nothing like the dressing of the early morning, because to go out is to be seen, and to be seen is to be judged by 100 small measures you will never be told you have failed. In the house, you may be a little easy. In the street, you are on display, a walking statement of your husband's income and your own breeding. And every article you put on must be correct for the errand, the hour, the season, and your station, all at once. The bonnet first, or the hat, depending on the year and your age, and where you mean to go. And the difference between the two is not a small thing, but a language. Then the gloves, and the gloves are not optional, and not a matter of comfort. A lady's hands are covered out of doors, always in kid or in cotton, depending on the weather and the occasion. And to be seen in the street with bare hands is to be seen improperly dressed, which is a kind of nakedness that has nothing to do with the body. You draw them on, working each finger down, and they are close, and they are warm, and by the time you return, they will be soiled at the fingertips, and will need cleaning or replacing. And a woman of your household will go through a great many pairs of gloves in a year. And this, too, is a cost, quietly, of being respectable. A shawl or a mantle over the shoulders, the small bag with a card case, and very little money in it. And then the question that is not a question at all, because it has only one answer. You do not simply walk out of your own front door alone and go where you please. A woman of your class, at the age you are, does not go into the streets unaccompanied for most purposes, and certainly not into the wider city. You take a servant, or you take a companion, or you go in the carriage, and which one depends on where you are going and why. To walk the few doors to a neighbor's house in your own quiet square, in daylight, you might go alone or with the smallest of escorts. To go further, into the shopping streets, into any part of the town where you are not known, you go attended. This is worth slowing down for, because it is one of the strangest rules of your whole life once you look at it directly. And you have never once looked at it directly, because it was set into you before you could question it. The rule is that your presence in public is not entirely your own to give. It must be witnessed, framed, vouched for. A respectable woman moving through the streets alone, at certain hours or in certain places, is not simply a woman going about her day. She is a woman whose respectability is, by her being alone there, quietly in question. And the question is not one she can answer by explaining herself. She answers it in advance, by never being there alone in the first place. The servant walking a pace behind you carries your parcels, yes, but the servant is also, in a sense that no one states, your evidence. You are a woman who is attended. You are a woman who belongs to a household that can spare a person to walk behind her. You are, therefore, a woman whose being in this street is accounted for. There is a geography to all of this, and you carry the map of it in your body without ever having drawn it. There are streets where a woman of your class may walk in daylight with an attendant and think nothing of it. There are streets she may drive through in a closed carriage, but would not walk. There are streets she does not enter at all, not because a law forbids it, but because to be seen entering them would be a statement about herself she could never take back. The hour matters as much as the place. The same street that is unremarkable at 11 in the morning becomes, as the afternoon fades and the evening comes on, a place a lady of your standing is simply not, because the meaning of a woman alone in a street shifts with the light, and by dusk the meaning has curdled into something you will not risk your name against. None of this is written in any book you own. You learned it the way you learned everything, by watching, by the small corrections of your mother and your governess, by the particular silence that would fall if you proposed to do a thing you should not. So you go out attended, and the going out is itself a small performance. The carriage, if you take it, is brought round, and to be conveyed in your own carriage is one thing, and to walk is another, and each says something. On foot, with the maid a pace behind, you move through the square and out toward the wider streets, and now the second layer of the public rules begins, the one that governs not where you go, but who you are to when you meet them, because the street is not empty of people you know, and every one of them is a small decision. Here comes a woman you know slightly, of roughly your own standing, and the thing is managed almost without thought, a slight inclination of the head, a word if you are close enough and the acquaintance warrants it, and you pass on, and the small acknowledgement has been paid and received. Here comes a woman you know well, and there is more, a proper greeting, perhaps a pause to speak, though even the pause has its rules, because two ladies do not stand and talk at length in the middle of a public thoroughfare, as though it were a drawing room. And here, coming toward you, is the situation that has no easy shape, the acquaintance who is above you, or the acquaintance with whom something has gone wrong. And here you must know precisely what is owed, and precisely what is not. For the greeting in the street runs, like everything else in your world, along the lines of rank, and it runs in a particular direction. It is generally for the lady of higher standing to acknowledge the lady of lower standing first, to offer the bow or the nod that permits the exchange to happen at all. You do not press your acquaintance on a woman above you. You wait to be recognized, and if she recognizes you, you return it with exactly the warmth the relation calls for, and no more. To offer too much is to presume. To offer too little, where recognition is due, is to slight. And you make this calculation in the half-second it takes two women to approach each other on a pavement, and you make it correctly, every time, because you have been making it your whole life. And then there is the sharpest instrument the street holds, the one that requires no words at all, and it is worth understanding exactly, because it is how the entire system enforces itself without ever seeming to raise its voice. It is called the cut. To cut a person is to meet them and to decline to know them. You see them, and they see that you have seen them, and you allow no flicker of recognition to cross your face, and you pass as though the space they occupy were empty air. There are gradations of it. There is simply failing to bow, which might be an oversight and might be a message. And there is the thing done deliberately and unmistakably, the eyes meeting and then moving through the person as if they were glass, the head turning very slightly away, done clearly and in company so that others see it done. It is a public statement that this person is no longer to be known, and it lands with a force that has nothing to do with its silence, and everything to do with what everyone watching understands it to mean. Here is what makes it so strange and so effective. It is invisible to anyone who does not already know the language. A person from outside your world could stand on that pavement and watch one woman decline to see another, and observe nothing at all. No raised voice, no scene, no incivility that could be named. And yet a social execution has just been carried out in full daylight, witnessed, understood, and beyond appeal. The whole apparatus of your world's discipline works this way. It punishes not with force, but with withdrawal, not by doing something to you, but by ceasing to do the small daily, some things that mark you as one of the known and the acknowledged. And because it is invisible, because it can always be denied, because a cut can be passed off as a failure of eyesight or a moment of distraction, there is no defending yourself against it and no appealing it. You simply find one day that you are being seen through, and you understand, and the understanding is the whole of the punishment. So you walk your errand with all of this alive around you, the map of where you may be, and the arithmetic of who is owed what, and the ever-present possibility. If you have erred somewhere, if some rumor has moved through the drawing rooms, that a woman you expect to greet will look at you and not see you, you return the bows that are offered. You offer the ones that are due. You keep your maid at the correct distance behind you, close enough to be your evidence and your help, far enough to preserve the fiction that you walk alone through a world that is entirely at your ease. And nothing visible happens. That is the point. To an eye that could not read it, you are only a well-dressed woman taking the air on a fine morning, gloved and attended, nodding pleasantly to the people she knows. Every bit of the labor and the vigilance and the risk is hidden under the surface of a pleasant walk, which is, by now, a thing you might have said about almost every hour of your day. You reach the corner where your errand takes you, the maid a step behind with the empty basket for whatever is to be carried home, and you have crossed the streets correctly, and greeted correctly and been greeted, and no one has cut you, and you have cut no one, and the small public examination is passed for another morning, and you have not the least sense of having passed an examination at all. It is only the street. It is only going out. You draw your gloved hand across the little bag at your side, and you turn toward the shop door, and you carry with you, without naming it, the certain knowledge that inside there will be more of the same. Other rules, other things a lady may and may not say aloud, and you are ready for them, because you have never in your life been anything else. The bell over the shop door announces you before you have said a word, and that is fitting, because a great deal of what happens in the next half hour will be said by things other than your voice. The shop is a draper's, warm and close, smelling of new cloth and beeswax, and the faint dust of folded fabric that has sat on a shelf. A young man comes forward, and there is already a script running between you that neither of you wrote. He will not ask you how much you wish to spend. You will not tell him to name a sum outright, to haggle openly, to let the question of money sit plainly on the counter between you, would be a small breach, and you both know it. And so you conduct the entire transaction in a language designed to keep the actual subject, just out of sight. You ask to see the grey silk in the window, the one with the faint stripe. You turn it in the light. You say it is very good. You do not say it is dear, though it is, and you both understand that when you say a length would be more than you had thought of taking this season, you are declining the price without ever having heard yourself refuse. He proposes a different weight, a plainer weave. You consider it as though considering the fabric, and the two of you arrive at an understanding about what you can afford without a single figure being spoken above a murmur, the figure itself written on a slip and slid across the wood rather than announced. This is the first rule of speech you live under, and it is one of the strangest. A lady may spend money. A lady may not be seen to think about money. The whole apparatus of polite phrasing exists to let her do the one while never appearing to do the other. Here is something worth slowing down for, because the rule about money is only the visible edge of a much larger territory of things you may not say. The list of forbidden subjects is long, and you carry it so completely that you no longer experience it as a list at all, only as the shape of what conversation is. You may not speak of money, as we have seen. You may not speak of politics beyond the mildest and most general approval of whatever a gentleman present has already declared. You may not speak of religion in a way that suggests you have wrestled with it rather than simply received it. You may not speak of the body, your own or anyone's, its functions, its ailments below a certain line, its needs. You may not speak of anything to do with the getting or bearing of children, though you may have borne several. You may not repeat a coarse thing even to condemn it. You may not appear to know that certain districts of the city exist, or certain trades, or certain kinds of women. The territory of the unsayable is enormous, and a respectable woman's fluency is measured not by how much she can say, but by how gracefully she can move through a world of subjects while touching almost none of them. And yet, and this is the part that would surprise the person who imagines you empty-headed, you are expected to be informed. You are not permitted to be dull. A woman of your class is supposed to have read, to have opinions of a certain permitted temperature, to be able to speak of the new novel and the exhibition and the general state of things, with enough intelligence to be good company and never so much intelligence that a man must work to keep pace. You have read your Tennyson. You have read the reviews, if not always the books the reviews describe. You can speak of Mr. Dickens, who is safe, and of the poets, who are safe, and of foreign travel, which is safe, and of the doings of people you all know, which is the safest and most engrossing subject of all. You are asked to be a mind, but a mind kept within a narrow band, warm and quick and agreeable, never cold, never contrary, never a mind that presses a point past the moment a man wishes to change it. The discipline is not ignorance. The discipline is knowing a great deal and displaying exactly the correct measured portion of it. Behind you, at the counter, two women you know slightly have fallen into talk, and you drift into their orbit, because that is what the morning is partly for. And here the second and subtler rule shows itself. The rule not of what you may not say, but of how you must handle it when a forbidden subject drifts near the surface of a conversation and threatens to break through. One of them has begun, in the lowered and thrilling voice these things require, To speak of a household you all know, a marriage that is said to be unhappy, a wife whose husband is said to be, and here the voice drops further, not what he ought to be. Nothing improper is stated. Everything improper is understood. The whole scandal travels between the three of you in a currency of pauses and glances and half-sentences that stop at exactly the right cliff edge. You feel the conversation tilting toward a thing that must not be said in a shop, in daylight, above a whisper, and you do what you have been trained your whole life to do, which is to steer. You do not rebuke her, for that would be to acknowledge the subject as loudly as speaking it. You do not encourage her, for that would carry you both over the edge. Instead, you make a small remark about how one is so sorry for the children in such cases, which is true and permitted, and gently and firmly turns the boat. The unhappy marriage becomes the general pity of unhappy marriages, which becomes, a sentence later, a remark about a child's health, which becomes the weather, which is where all dangerous conversations are brought to die. You have redirected the whole thing so smoothly that neither woman feels checked. That is the art. Not silence, which is easy and rude, but redirection, which is difficult and gracious. The constant quiet labor of keeping talk on the permitted paths, while everyone pretends there are no paths at all and one may simply wander. Let us slow down over what is really happening in that exchange, because it reveals a whole hidden grammar. So much of what you and the women around you actually communicate is carried by things that are not words. There is a language of the fan, which you half believe in and half laugh at. A folklore that says a fan drawn across the cheek means one thing and held open in a particular way means another, and whether or not anyone truly signals a message, that precisely the point beneath the folklore is real. A great deal is said with the fan, the glance, the flower worn or not worn, the length of a pause, the exact degree of warmth in a greeting. When you may not say a thing outright, you learn to say it aslant. A woman who wishes to convey that she does not care for another woman does not say so. She says the other woman is looking very well in a certain tone, and everyone present hears the whole verdict inside the compliment. A woman who wishes to warn a friend away from a subject presses her foot, or lets a silence stretch a half beat too long, or asks after someone's mother with sudden brightness. Euphemism is not a decoration on this language. Euphemism is the language. You have spent your life becoming fluent in a way of speaking whose entire genius is to communicate everything while appearing to say almost nothing. And it costs you something, this fluency, though you would not put it that way and have never been invited to. There are things you would say if you could. There are opinions you hold, formed over years of reading and watching, that have no permitted room to be spoken, and so they thin slowly from disuse. There are questions about your own life and its arrangement that you have learned not to ask aloud, even to yourself, because the vocabulary for asking them has been quietly kept from you. You are, in the fullest sense, articulate. You can conduct 3 conversations at once, each in its correct register, redirecting, soothing, amusing, drawing out the shy guest, and gently muffling the loud one. Very few people alive are as skilled with the actual live machinery of talk as you are, and almost none of that skill may ever be turned toward saying the one true and simple thing you might most wish to say, whatever it is, on any given day. The instrument is magnificent. The range of notes you are permitted to play upon it is narrow. The two women at the counter have gone on to the safe country of a coming wedding, all of them relieved, and you gather your small purchase, the plainer silk, after all, wrapped in paper and string. The young man thanks you, and you thank him, in the exact words that thanks require, and the transaction that never once mentioned its true subject is complete. Your maid takes the parcel into the basket. Out on the pavement, the light has strengthened toward the fullness of the middle of the day, and you have, in the last half hour, refused a price without refusing it, discussed a scandal without discussing it, held opinions without airing them, and redirected a conversation away from ruin twice, all while appearing to do nothing but choose a length of cloth and pass the time of day with two acquaintances. You do not tally any of this. You did not experience it as work. It felt only like being in the world, being a woman in the world, moving through it in the way you have always moved. But every graceful turn of phrase you made this morning was a rule obeyed, and every subject you did not raise was a wall you had learned so long ago that you no longer see it as a wall, only as the edge of what a person like you naturally talks about. You step back into the flow of the street with your maid behind you and your plainer silk in the basket. And somewhere ahead of you, the day is already arranging its next set of rules, the ones that wait at home, in the nursery, where a small girl is at this hour being taught the very first and easiest of the phrases you have spent a lifetime perfecting. The house takes you back the way a warm room takes back someone who has been out in the cold, gradually, so that you hardly notice the moment you stop being a woman in the street and become again a woman in a household. Your bonnet is taken. Your gloves are peeled off finger by finger and set on the hall table. The parcel of silk goes somewhere it will be found again when it is wanted. And you stand for a moment in the hall, in the particular stillness of a house at the middle of the day, when the morning's work is done and the evening's has not yet begun. And you are, for the length of a breath, no one's mistress, and no one's wife, and no one's mother, only a person standing in a hall. It does not last. It is not meant to last. There is a note on the hall table in your husband's hand, left before he went out to his chambers this morning, and it concerns money. Not a large sum, not a crisis. Only the ordinary business of a household that costs more to keep than it did last year. He has looked at a figure and formed a view about it, and the note tells you his view. The dressmaker's account is to be paid, but the milliner's is to wait until the quarter turns. He does not ask what you think. He is not being unkind. He is simply doing what the law and the custom of the day agree is his to do, which is to decide, in the end, about the money. Let us slow down here, because this is the flaw beneath every rule you have obeyed since you woke, and most people who picture your life do not know it is there at all. Under the law of England in this year, a married woman does not, in the fullest sense, exist as a separate person. The doctrine is called coverture, an old word from an older language, and what it means is that upon marriage a woman is covered by her husband. Her legal being is folded into his. The great jurist Sir William Blackstone put it a century before your morning in a sentence that has governed every year since, that by marriage the husband and wife are one person in law, and that person is the husband. It is not a metaphor. It is the working principle of the courts. Consider what it means in the plainest terms. Any money you brought to the marriage became his upon the wedding. Any wages you might earn, were you the sort of woman who earned wages, would be his. The furniture you chose, the linen you count, the very dress you are wearing, belong in law to your husband. If you were to walk out of this house tomorrow, you could not take your own possessions with you, because in the eye of the law, they were never yours to take. You have no separate purse the law will recognize. The household account book you kept so carefully this morning, the shillings and pence tracked line by line, records the spending of money that is not and has never been your own. This is the thing to hold steady in your mind, because it explains a great deal that would otherwise look merely like custom or fussiness. The reason a lady may not discuss money in company is not only delicacy. It is that money is, at the root, the one subject on which she has no standing to speak. The reason your husband decides which account is paid and which waits is not that he is a tyrant. It is that the law has handed him the deciding and handed you the managing, and the two are not the same thing, though they are performed in the same house, over the same coins. And here is the strange doubleness of it, the thing that makes your position so difficult to describe to anyone who has not lived inside it. You manage nearly everything. You engaged the cook, and you could dismiss her. You set the day's meals, and the household's hours, and the children's schooling, and the shape of the family's whole domestic life. In the running of this house, you are, hour by hour, the authority. 100 small decisions are yours and yours alone, and they are real decisions, with real consequences, made with real skill. But the frame around all of it, the money that makes any of it possible, and the roof over all of it, and your own legal person, rest with the man who left a note on the hall table this morning, and went out to his chambers without asking what you thought. You pick up the note. You read your husband's view of the dressmaker and the milliner. And then you do the thing that women in your position have always done, which is to work within the frame you cannot alter. You will pay the dressmaker as instructed. But you know something your husband does not trouble to know, which is that the milliner is the sort of tradeswoman who remembers a slow-paying house and lets the memory show in her manner, and that a house known to pay late loses the first offer of the best new stock. So you will find, out of the ordinary running money that passes through your hands, a way to send the milliner something on account before the quarter turns, enough to keep her sweet, and you will do it quietly, and it will never appear as a disagreement, because there is no mechanism by which you and your husband disagree about money. There is only his decision, and your management of the world his decision produces. This is your real influence, and it is genuine, and it is entirely without a name in the law. You steer a great deal. You steer it the way a person steers a boat whose rudder answers, but whose sail is set by someone else, and whose destination was chosen before you came aboard. Within the course laid down for you, your hand on the tiller is skilled and constant, and it matters. But you did not choose the course, and you cannot change it. And everyone, including you, agrees to call the whole arrangement his. Now hold the note in your hand and think about the thing no one in this house says aloud at the middle of the day, because to say it would be to admit how narrow the ground is on which the whole comfortable structure stands. Every rule you obey, every skill you exercise, every ounce of the standing you enjoy in this street and this parish rests on one condition, which is that the marriage continues and that your husband remains alive and solvent and well disposed toward you. Remove any one of those, and the ground is gone. Suppose he were to die. You would not, in the ordinary run of things, be left with nothing, for a prudent man of his class makes some provision, a settlement, a portion, a widow's income arranged before the marriage by fathers and lawyers who understood exactly how thin a woman's position would otherwise be. But observe that even your protection had to be arranged for you by men in advance, precisely because the law would not protect you on its own. And observe how much smaller that widow's portion is than the household income you manage now. A woman who runs a house of this size on several £100 a year may find herself, widowed, expected to keep herself and perhaps her unmarried daughters on a fraction of it, in smaller rooms, with fewer servants, having given up nothing in skill and everything in scale. The competence remains. The stage on which to exercise it shrinks to almost nothing, and suppose, worse, there had been no settlement, or the money had been badly managed or lost. Then a widow of your class descends quickly into a territory with very few footholds. She might teach, if she is educated, becoming the governess in someone else's nursery, on the wrong side of the very rules she once set. She might take in a lodger, or do fine needlework for pay, and in doing so, she would step over an invisible line and become, in the eyes of the street, no longer quite a lady. The distance between the woman receiving morning callers in her drawing room and the woman stitching for hire in a back room is, in truth, only the distance of one funeral and a badly drawn will. This is not a story anyone tells at breakfast, but it is the reason the marriage matters so enormously, and the reason the rules around it are so absolute, and the reason a woman of your class learns, without ever being taught in words, to keep her husband's regard the way a sailor keeps an eye on the weather, not from servility, from accurate knowledge of how the wind can turn. It would be wrong to leave you believing that everyone accepts this as the settled order of the world, because in this very decade there are women, and some men, working steadily and by name to change it. There are those campaigning for a law that would let a married woman keep her own property and her own earnings as her own. A plain idea that sounds to some ears in this year like the unpicking of society itself. The reformer Barbara Bodichon has written and argued on exactly this ground. The work is slow, and the full change will not come for some years yet, and it will come in pieces rather than all at once, but it is being done in committee rooms and pamphlets and petitions by people who have looked at the note on the hall table and refused to agree that its logic is eternal. You have not read their pamphlets. Or if you have folded the thought away where such thoughts are kept, alongside all the other things a woman of your position knows and does not say. You set your husband's note back down on the hall table. You have already decided, without deciding out loud, what you will do about the milliner. And you turn toward the stairs, because it is past the middle of the day now, And there is a small girl in the nursery who is waiting for her scheduled hour with her mother, and who is, at this moment, being taught the phrases and the postures that will one day make her too a woman well fitted to a frame she did not build. The nursery is at the top of the house, above the family bedrooms, up a narrower flight of stairs than the ones the visitors climb. This is deliberate. The nursery is placed high, partly for the light and the air, which the medical thinking of the day considers healthful for children, and partly because a child crying at 2 in the morning should not be heard in the drawing room where guests were sitting at 10. Distance is built into the architecture. You climb toward it now, past the landing, and the sounds change as you go, the clock and the front door falling away below you, and a different set of sounds rising to meet you. A small voice, the creak of a rocking chair, the particular quiet of a room where children are meant to be kept both occupied and out of the way. At the top, the nurse rises when you enter. She is a woman of perhaps 40, capable, and she has been with you longer than the housemaid has. She holds a position that is difficult to describe simply, because she has authority over your children that in some hours of the day exceeds your own, and yet she is your servant and takes her wage from your household book. She has bathed them and fed them, and sat up with them through the nights of their illnesses. She knows the exact temperature at which your youngest becomes fretful, and she steps back when you come into the room, because the room, for this one scheduled hour, becomes yours. Here is something worth slowing down for, because it cuts against nearly everything a later age will assume about motherhood. You are not the person who spends the day with your children. In a household of your standing, that is not the mother's work, and it would in fact be slightly improper for it to be so, a sign that something in the domestic machinery had failed. The daily labor of the youngest children belongs to the nurse. The daily teaching of the older ones belongs to the governess, who arrived some months ago and takes £45 a year, paid quarterly, and who occupies her own strange middle station in the house, too educated to eat with the servants, and too poor to sit as an equal at your table. Your role is supervisory. You engage these women. You set the standards they are to keep. You dismiss them if they fail, and you appear in the nursery at appointed times to inspect, to encourage, and to be, for a measured interval, the mother. The interval is measured, and that matters. The children are brought to you, or you go to them, at fixed points in the day, and the visit has a shape and an end. This is not because you feel nothing. It is because the rules of your class hold that affection, like everything else, is best shown in its proper form and its proper amount. A mother who was forever in the nursery, forever handling and kissing her children, forever disrupting the nurse's routine, would be thought to lack the discipline that her position requires. Love is real here, but it is expressed through provision and oversight, through the securing of good servants and good schooling and good health, more than through the constant physical presence that a later century will decide is the very definition of maternal devotion. You would find that later definition exhausting and slightly indecent. The nurse would find it an insult to her competence. So there is a whole division of labor here, and it is worth laying out plainly, because the calm of the nursery depends on everyone knowing their place within it. The nurse governs the bodies of the small children, the feeding and washing and sleeping. The nursemaid under her does the carrying and the fetching and the endless small physical work. The governess governs the minds of the older children, the reading and the French and the drawing and the deportment, and above all of them, appearing at intervals, stands the mother, who governs the governors, who sets the tone the whole apparatus is meant to sustain. Your management here is exactly the same skill you use with the cook and the housemaid, applied now to the most valuable output the household produces, which is children fit to take their places in the world. Your youngest comes to you first, and you take the small weight and hold it for a moment. And this is the part of the hour that needs no rule to make it happen. Then you set the child down, because the nurse is watching, and because the hour has its business. The business is your daughter. She's old enough now for the schoolroom, and the governess brings her forward to show you what she has been learning. And this is the moment in the day when the rules stop being something you merely obey and become something you are actively passing on. She curtsies to you. She has been taught to curtsy to her own mother, and she does it well, and you feel the small, complicated thing that every mother in your position feels at this, which is pride that she does it correctly, braided together with something you do not let yourself examine too closely. She recites for you, perhaps a passage learned by heart, perhaps a short piece of French, perhaps a sum worked on a slate. And you listen, and you correct the one word she has wrong, and you watch the governess watching you to see whether your standard is exacting or lax. The lessons themselves tell you exactly what your daughter is being made into. She learns to read and to write a fair hand, because a lady must write letters correctly. She learns enough arithmetic to keep household accounts, and not one step beyond it. She learns French because French is an ornament and a sign of breeding, and perhaps a little Italian for the same reason. She learns to draw and to paint in watercolors, to play the piano, to sing a little. She learns to sit still, to enter a room, to hold her shoulders straight without a board behind them, to sew a fine seam. And here is the shape of the whole thing, the piece that would be almost funny if it were not so complete. Nearly everything on that list is an accomplishment rather than a knowledge. It is meant to be displayed in a drawing room to demonstrate that her father could afford to have her taught it, and that she will make a decorative and capable wife for a man of the right sort. The French is not for reading French thought. The drawing is not for becoming an artist. The piano is not so that she might one day be a musician of any account. These are the outward signs of a girl who has been properly finished. And finishing is exactly the word the era uses, as though a girl were a piece of furniture brought to its final polish. She is being fitted for the same drawing room you sit in, the same accounts you keep, the same calls you pay, the same silver tray of cards, the same law of coverture that will one day fold her own property into some husband's name. She is, in other words, being trained to want the frame. That is the deepest and quietest work of the whole nursery, and it is why the rules do not need to be enforced with much visible force in a house like this one. A woman who has been raised from 4 years old to find the correct thing satisfying, to feel a small glow of rightness when she curtsies well, and a small flush of shame when she does not need to be watched every hour. She has been given the rules on the inside, where they will do their work without a keeper. The corset is only the outward one. The inward stays are laced in here, in this bright high room, over these measured hours, by a mother who was laced the same way, and by a governess who was laced more tightly still. You know this. That is the thing that makes the hour heavier than it looks. You are not a woman who has never had a thought about her own condition. You have folded such thoughts away, as we have seen, but folded is not the same as gone. And here in the nursery, they press faintly against the fold. You look at your daughter, who is bright, who learns her French faster than the governess expected, who has a quickness in her that the accomplishments will have no real use for, and you are training that quickness toward a room. You are doing it because you love her, and because you know exactly what happens to a woman of your class who is not fitted for the room, which is nothing good. And so the loving thing and the confining thing are the same act, done with the same hands, in the same measured hour. There is no villain in this. That is what makes it so difficult to see, and so difficult to change. The nurse is kind, the governess is diligent and underpaid, and doing her honest best. You are attentive and careful, and genuinely devoted to your children's welfare, as your world defines welfare. And the sum of all this care, all this competence, all this real affection, is that a small girl is being shaped, gently and thoroughly, and by people who wish her only well, to inherit a set of rules that no one in the room has the power to abolish. The system reproduces itself not through cruelty, but through love administered correctly. Every generation of women teaches the next generation the postures, and the postures hold. The hour is ending. You can feel it ending the way you can feel any of the day's fixed intervals ending, by some internal clock that the years have set in you, as surely as the governess is setting one in your daughter. The nurse is preparing the youngest for the afternoon rest. The governess is gathering the slate and the reader, ready to take your daughter back to the schoolroom for the next portion of her instruction. You have done what the hour required. You have inspected, encouraged, corrected the one wrong word, and reminded everyone in the room, without saying anything so vulgar as a direct order, exactly what your standards are. Your daughter curtsies to you again before she goes. You watch her do it, small and precise, and already good at it, and you tell her it was well done, because it was, and because the telling is part of the lacing too. Then she is led away, and the nursery returns to the nurse's governance, and you turn back toward the stairs. It is well into the afternoon now, and the day is about to demand its second great transformation. The whole apparatus of the morning undone and built again for the evening that is coming. And there is not much time before the maid will be waiting for you with the afternoon dress laid out. The maid is waiting, exactly as you knew she would be. She has been up here while you were in the nursery, and she has already begun the work that makes the afternoon possible, which is to say, she has laid out on the bed the whole architecture of your second self. You come into the room, and the light has shifted since morning. It comes now from a different angle, lower and warmer, catching the dust that hangs in every room of a house this size, no matter how many hours are spent chasing it. The afternoon dress is laid across the counterpane. and beside it the things that go under and around it, and the sight of all of it arranged. There is the sight of an hour of your life about to be spent. You must be undone before you can be redone. This is the part people forget when they picture the leisured woman of your class, if they picture her at all. They imagine, perhaps, that she wears one lovely thing all day and drifts through her rooms in it. The truth is that you will be dressed and undressed and dressed again before the lamps are lit, and each dressing is a small campaign requiring another person's hands and a good part of an hour. The morning dress comes off first. The maid works at the fastenings down the back, the ones your own arms were never meant to reach. And this fact alone tells you something about the garment and about the life. A dress that a woman cannot get into or out of by herself is a dress that announces she has someone to do it for her. The helplessness is not an accident of the design. The helplessness is the point. Here is something worth slowing down for, because the afternoon change is not a matter of vanity, though it is easy to mistake it for one. The rule of your class is that the dress must suit the hour, and the hours are many. There is the morning dress, plain and high and made of washable stuff, suitable for the desk and the household, and the receiving of no one who matters. There is the afternoon or visiting dress, richer, more trimmed, made to be seen in a drawing room and to be seen leaving a carriage. There is the dinner dress, later, grander still. To wear the morning dress into the afternoon would be a small failure that the right eyes would catch at once, and the right eyes are always watching. So the change is not indulgence, it is compliance. You are obeying a rule that says the day is divided into named parts, and each part has its own required costume. And to blur them is to confess that you do not understand the divisions every one of your kind is meant to understand by instinct. Off comes the morning dress, then, and the maid hangs it to be brushed and aired. You stand in your underthings while she brings the afternoon gown, and you feel the brief, strange freedom of the interval, the few minutes when you are between two constructed selves, and briefly only yourself, in your chemise and your stays, cool where the day's dress had been warm. It does not last. It is not meant to last. The maid is already lifting the afternoon dress, and the second building begins. Consider what she is holding. The afternoon gown of a woman in your position, in this year, is a considerable object. The bodice is boned and fitted close, cut to sit over the corset so exactly that the two seem one surface. The skirt is drawn back and gathered behind in the fashion of the moment, and beneath it there is the whole hidden scaffolding that gives the fashion its shape, the tapes and the pads and the underskirt that holds the drapery where it is meant to fall. There is trimming at the cuffs and the throat, a band of a contrasting silk, perhaps a row of covered buttons that fasten nothing and exist only to be looked at. All of this was made by hand. A dress like this represents days of a seamstress's labor, the cutting and the fitting, and the endless small stitches along every seam and every edge, work done by eyes bent close to the cloth by lamplight, for wages you would find it uncomfortable to think about too precisely. That is a thing to sit with for a moment. When you consider the price of such a gown, and a woman of your household might have a dozen or more in current use across the seasons, you are really considering two prices at once. there is the price you pay, the sum entered in the account book, the guineas that go to the dressmaker and are folded into your husband's sense of what his position requires. And there is the other price, the one that never appears in any book you keep, which is the hours of the women who actually made the thing, the ones who will never wear anything like it. The gown that takes you an hour to be laced into took someone else a week to build. You do not think of this every time. Of course, no one could. But it is true, whether you think of it or not. Stitched into the very seams the maid is now settling across your shoulders. She fastens the back, working upward, each small hook finding its eye. You stand still for her, arms slightly lifted. And this holding still is itself a skill you learned so long ago, you cannot remember learning it. A woman being dressed does not fidget. She stands like a figure, being draped, patient and upright, and lets the work be done to her. Your mother stood like this. Her mother stood like this. Somewhere in another house at this same hour, your own small daughter is being taught, in the smaller version suited to a child, the beginnings of exactly this stillness. The dress is on now. It sits close and correct, and it changes how you can move, as every one of your dresses does, requiring a shorter step and a straighter back and a particular way of sitting that keeps the drapery behind you unspoiled. You have never in your adult life worn a garment that let you move freely, and so the constraint does not register to you as constraint. It registers as being properly dressed. That is what the rules do, given enough years. They stop feeling like rules and start feeling like the shape of the world. Then the hair. The morning arrangement will not do for the afternoon any more than the morning dress will, and so the maid takes it down and dresses it again. And this, too, is a quarter of an hour at least. She brushes it out and gathers it and pins it into the fuller, more formal shape the later day requires. And you sit before the glass and watch a face that is beginning, in the low afternoon light, to look like the face the evening will see. She works with pins held between her lips, and her fingers moving quickly. And neither of you speaks much, because this is a familiar operation performed by two people who have performed it together many times. Now, the question of ornament, and here the rules tighten again, because jewelry is not simply a matter of what you own or what you like. There are rules about what may be worn at what hour, and rules about what suits a woman of your age, and rules about what is proper for a married woman, as opposed to a girl. Diamonds are for the evening, and would be absurd, almost improper, in the afternoon. A young unmarried girl wears little and modest things. A matron may wear more, but not too much. Never so much as to seem to be displaying wealth for its own sake, which is the error of the newly rich and the surest mark of not truly belonging. So you choose within the narrow band the rules allow. A brooch, perhaps, and the earrings suited to daylight, and your wedding ring, which is not ornament but statement, the small gold fact from which your whole standing in the world proceeds. And here is the thing about all of it, the whole hour of undoing and redoing. That is easiest to miss. The entire elaborate transformation must appear to have cost you no effort at all. That is the deepest rule underneath all the smaller ones. A woman may spend an hour and another person's labor being rebuilt for the afternoon. But she must emerge from that hour, looking as though she simply is this way, naturally, effortlessly, as though the correct gown and the correct hair and the correct restrained ornament had assembled themselves upon her while she thought of higher things, to be caught having tried, to show the strain of the effort, to arrive somewhere flushed or hurried or visibly assembled, is itself a small failure. The work must be total, and the work must be invisible. You must labor for an hour to look as though you have never labored in your life. This is the same fiction you have been maintaining since before dawn, only now made visible in the mirror. The whole day has been the same act performed in different rooms. In the morning, it was the household accounts made to look like idleness. At the breakfast table, it was authority made to look like precedence. In the drawing room, it was practiced ease made to look like natural grace. And here, at the glass, it is an hour of another woman's hands made to look like nature. The dress announces your husband's success. The restraint announces your breeding. The invisible effort announces that all of this comes to you without trying, which is the final and most necessary lie. The maid steps back. She looks at you the way a workman looks at a finished thing, checking the line of the shoulders, the fall of the skirt, a strand of hair that has escaped and must be pinned. She reaches and fixes it. You rise, carefully, in the way the dress permits, and you turn once so she can see the back, and she nods, and it is done. You are the afternoon version of yourself now, complete and correct, ready to be seen by anyone who might see you. There is a strangeness in it that you do not usually let yourself feel, though you feel it now, for just a moment, standing rebuilt in the lowering light. You have spent a full hour of the one life you are given being taken apart and put back together for no reason, but that the clock has moved from morning into afternoon, and that the world you live in has decided that morning and afternoon require different women, and there is no rest at the end of it, because the afternoon is only the door to the evening, and the evening has its own transformation waiting, grander and more exacting than this one. But that is still some hours off, for now you are dressed and correct, and there is a household below you that will not run itself, and a dinner coming that must be arranged. So you leave the glass, and the maid begins to clear away the morning things, and you go down to meet the next set of the day's demands, already wearing the face they will require. The room you go down into is not the drawing room now, but the small back parlour near the stairs, the one that in a great house would be a proper still room, and in yours is simply the place where the household's business gets settled. The cook is already there, waiting, with the slate she uses for the day's marketing, and a folded sheet of paper on which the two of you settled the shape of the evening yesterday. She stands when you enter, because that is the rule between you, and you tell her to sit, because that is your privilege. And she sits again on the edge of a hard chair, while you take the softer one. This is the meeting where the dinner is truly made, hours before a single guest arrives, and it is made in a low back room by two women, one of whom will be named as the hostess, and one of whom will not be named at all. You go through the courses with her, and there are many of them, because a dinner for company is not a meal in the sense your grandmother would have understood a meal. There is soup, and after the soup a fish, and after the fish the removes, which are the larger dishes brought in when the fish is taken away, and after those the entrees, the smaller made dishes that show the kitchen's skill, and then the roast, and then the sweets and the savory, and then the dessert of fruit and ices, when the cloth itself has been drawn. Each of these is not one dish, but several set upon the table together, so that the guests may choose and be offered. And each of them the cook must produce hot and in sequence from a kitchen below the stairs, with a coal range, and no help but 2 women and a boy. You do not cook any of it. You could not. But you decide the whole of its shape, and if it fails, the failure is yours to carry into the drawing room on your face. Here is something easy to misunderstand about a dinner like this. It is not meant to look expensive. That is the surprising rule underneath all the others, and it separates the woman who truly knows her business from the woman who is merely rich. To pile the table with the costliest things, to show the guest at every turn how much has been spent, is the mark of the newly arrived and the anxious. The whole art is to appear to have taken no trouble at all, to set before people a dinner of real skill and expense, while behaving as though this is simply how your table happens to look on an ordinary Tuesday when friends have called. The effort must be total, and it must be invisible, and the invisibility is the more important half. A guest who leaves thinking how much that must have cost has not been flattered. A guest who leaves thinking how easy the whole thing seemed, how naturally your household produces such things, has been told exactly what you meant to tell them. So you and the cook plan not for splendor, but for correctness. The right number of dishes for the number of guests, neither so few that the table looks thin, nor so many that it looks vulgar. Dishes in season, because to serve forced fruit or out-of-season game is to announce a straining after-effect. Nothing repeated in flavor from one course to the next. A balance of the rich and the plain, the made dish and the simple roast, so that the whole of it moves like a piece of music from the light opening to the fuller middle and down again to the sweetness at the close. The cook knows all of this better than you do. Your part is to know that she knows it, to defer to her where her craft is real, and to hold the final word where the final word is a matter of what is proper rather than what is possible in the kitchen. It is a strange authority, resting entirely on rank and not at all on knowledge, and both of you understand its exact edges without ever once naming them. You settle the wines, or rather, you confirm what the husband settled, because the wine cellar and its key are his, and the choosing of what comes up is a thing that belongs to the man of the house, even when he is at his office all day, and you are the one who must see it decanted. You settle the number, who will sit down, and the number decides everything else, because the number decides the seating, and the seating is the deepest rule of the evening, and the one you will spend more thought on than the food. This is worth slowing down for, because the arrangement of guests around a dinner table in a house like yours is not a matter of putting friends beside friends. It is governed by precedence, which is to say by rank, and the rules of it are as fixed as the rules of a church service. The most important lady present is taken in to dinner on the arm of the host and seated at his right hand. The most important gentleman takes in the hostess and sits at her right. Down the table from there, the guests descend in order of their standing. The man of higher rank nearer the head, the lower nearer the foot, and each gentleman is paired to take in and sit beside a particular lady, chosen so that the whole table alternates, man and woman, all the way down its length. To seat two women together, or two men, is an error that will be noticed. To seat a guest below their proper place is worse than an error. It is an insult, delivered in silence, that the wronged party will feel exactly and remember long after the soup is forgotten. And so you sit with a scrap of paper and the names of your guests, and you work it out like a puzzle that has only one correct answer, weighing a baronet's widow against a rising barrister with a knighthood in his future, deciding whether the clergyman ranks by his living or by the family he married into, remembering that this couple must not be placed near that one because of a coolness between them that everyone knows about and no one has ever spoken of aloud. You do this alone, at your desk, with no one to help you, and if you get it right, no one will remark on it, and if you get it wrong, the whole table will know within a moment of sitting down, and the knowledge will settle over the evening like a change in the weather. There is no reward for the correct answer. There is only the absence of disaster, which is the only reward this kind of labor is ever permitted. When the seating is fixed, you go up to the dining room to look at the table itself, which the parlour-maid has been laying since the middle of the afternoon, under directions you gave her that morning. You walk the length of it, and you count. You count the covers, the places set, to be sure none has been forgotten, and none added. You count the glasses at each place, the several sizes for the several wines, and check that they stand in their order. You look down the line of the cloth, which must be white and smooth, and without a crease the iron missed, and along it the silver, which has been counted already in the pantry, and will be counted again when it is washed and put away tonight, because silver is wealth in a portable form, and every piece of it is known and watched. The flowers are the last thing, and the thing that is most visibly yours, because the food will be credited to the cook by anyone who thinks about it, and the wine to your husband. But the look of the table, its lowness so that guests may see one another across it, the small arrangements that do not block a sight line or overpower the air with scent, all of this is understood to be the hostess's own taste, and it is one of the few parts of the whole enormous machine that will be praised to your face as yours. So you attend to it. You have the maid move an arrangement an inch, and turn another, and you step back to the door, and look at the whole as a guest will see it on entering, and you adjust until it satisfies you. And this small act of arranging flowers is, by a strange arithmetic, the single most publicly acknowledged piece of work you will do all day. Now think for a moment about everything that stands behind this table, unseen, that must move exactly right in the next hours for the evening to seem effortless. Below you, the cook and her helpers are already deep in the heat of it, the range crowded, the timing of a dozen dishes held in one woman's head, so that each arrives at the table hot at the moment it is wanted, and not before. The parlour-maid will carry and serve, moving around the table in the proper direction, offering each dish at the correct side, removing and replacing plates between courses without a clatter, filling glasses without being asked, and doing the whole of it silently, so that the food seems almost to arrive by itself. A boy will run the plates down and the clean ones up. In a grander house, there would be a footman behind half the chairs. In yours, there is not, and the shortfall must be covered by planning so careful that no guest feels the want of it, and directing the whole of this apparatus, though not one guest will see her do it, is you, not with your hands. With a glance across the room that tells the maid the next course may come, with the timing you set that morning and cannot now change, with the arrangement you made so that the two women at odds are far apart, and the shy young man is beside someone kind, and the talk will flow because you built the conditions for it to flow. You are the conductor of an orchestra that must appear to have no conductor at all. And the finer the evening goes, the less anyone will suspect there was a conductor in the first place. That is the rule you have accepted, the one beneath all the smaller rules of seating and courses and flowers. Your work succeeds precisely in the measure that it disappears. And so, with the table counted and the flowers turned and the kitchen at its labor below, you go to be dressed for the last time today, into the evening version of yourself, to walk downstairs and greet the first carriage as though you had been doing nothing all afternoon but waiting idly for your friends to arrive. The first carriage arrives at 8, or a little after, because the rule of arriving is as fixed as everything else, and it says that a guest comes neither early nor late, but within the narrow band of minutes that shows respect without eagerness. You hear the wheels on the road before you hear the bell. There is a moment, standing at the top of your own stairs, when the whole of the day's construction is about to be tested, and you feel it in the way you feel the corset now, familiar and total, holding you upright, whether you wish it or not. You descend to greet them. The couple in the hall are shedding their outer things into the hands of the servant, and the first rule of the evening asserts itself at once, silently, in the order of who is spoken to first. The lady is greeted before the gentleman, the elder before the younger, a person of higher rank before one of lower, even by the smallest margin, even where you privately like the lower one better. You have run this arithmetic so many times that it is no longer arithmetic. It happens beneath thought, the way you no longer count the steps down your own staircase. Your face does the warm thing it is required to do, and it is not entirely a lie, because you are glad, in the ordinary way, to see them. But the gladness and the calculation run side by side, and you could not separate them now if you tried. They come over the next quarter hour, in ones and twos. The drawing room fills with the low, civilized noise of people who all know the same rules, and are all, for this hour, performing them together. And then, when the last expected guest has arrived and been folded into the room, the moment comes that the whole evening has been arranged around. Dinner is announced. Here the choreography becomes exact. The guests do not simply drift toward the dining room in whatever order they please. They go in couples, arm in arm, in a strict sequence of precedence, and it is your husband who leads, offering his arm to the lady of highest rank present, while you come last, on the arm of the highest-ranking gentleman. It looks, to an outsider, like courtesy. It is courtesy. It is also a ranking, made visible and physical, a small procession in which every person's exact place in the order of things is displayed to everyone else. A woman who has been in society for 20 years can read the whole hierarchy of a dinner in the order the couples move through the door, the way a herald could once read a coat of arms. Get this wrong. Seat a duke's daughter below a banker's wife. Send the wrong pair through the door in the wrong order. And you have not merely made an error of taste. You have insulted someone in a code that everyone present can read and no one will mention aloud. You take your place at one end of the long table, your husband at the other, the guests arranged between you in the pattern you fixed that morning and could not alter after. And now begins the part of the evening that is most purely a performance and most invisibly a labor, and it is yours as much as anyone's. There is a rule, so widely understood that no one ever states it, about the direction of conversation at a dinner table. You speak first with the gentleman on one side of you. Then, at a certain point, signaled by nothing more than the change of a course or the turning of the hostess at the head of the table, the whole assembly turns, as one, to the neighbor on the other side. It is called turning the table, and it happens without announcement. A slow, tidal shift of attention passing down the length of the cloth. If you turn too soon, you abandon a conversation half finished. If you turn too late, you leave the person on your other side stranded, staring at the back of a head. And so you attend not only to your own two neighbors, but to the rhythm of the whole room, ready to turn when the room turns, part of a single organism that must breathe in time. What may be said as you turn and turn again is bounded on every side. This is the table, the most public room of your life, and the rules of speech that govern your whole day tighten here to their finest point. You may be informed, you are expected to be informed, in fact, to have read enough and heard enough to hold up your end with a member of Parliament on one side and a clergyman on the other. But you may not be opinionated. There is a particular register a woman of your class learns to speak in at a table like this, in which she demonstrates that she has understood the question perfectly and then declines, gracefully, to press a view of her own. She draws the gentleman out. She asks the question that lets him shine. She supplies the fact he has half forgotten and lets him take it up as though it were his. She is informed enough to be interesting and yielding enough to be no threat, and the maintenance of that exact balance, course after course, hour after hour, is as much a physical skill as the lacing of the corset that holds her while she does it. Consider what this asks. You have read the same books. You have, very likely, thought about the matter under discussion longer and more clearly than the man expounding it, because you have sat at more tables than he has, and heard the argument made more ways. And the rule requires that all of this be held quietly behind the eyes, brought out only in the service of someone else's brilliance, never turned to the display of your own. A woman who forgets this, who argues a point to its conclusion and wins it plainly against a gentleman at her own table, will find that she has won nothing at all. She will be called clever, and clever, in this room, is not a compliment. It is a warning passed quietly among the other women, a small mark against her name in the ledger everyone keeps and no one shows. And so the courses come and go, and the talk turns and turns, and you steer it as surely as you steered the kitchen this afternoon, though now you are seated among your guests and holding a fork. When the clergyman's wife grows quiet, you find her a subject, When the argument between the two gentlemen at the middle of the table begins to sharpen past the point of pleasantness, you lift a light question across it, and the sharpness dissolves into laughter, and no one but you quite knows that anything was done at all. The finer the evening goes, the less it will seem that anyone made it go. Then, at the proper moment, the moment that comes after the last savoury course, and before the men settle to their wine, you rise. You catch the eye of the lady of highest rank, the smallest inclination of the head, and you stand, and the other women stand with you, and together you leave the room. The gentlemen rise as you go, and then sit again, and the doors close, and the evening divides cleanly into two. This is the withdrawing, and it is worth pausing over, because in one small ceremony, it makes the whole architecture of your day visible. The men remain at the table, with their wine and their cigars, and above all, with their talk, which is now free to turn to the subjects it could not touch while you were present. Politics without hedging, business, the affairs of the wider world, spoken of plainly among men who take for granted that the wider world is theirs to speak of. And you and the other women withdraw to the drawing room, to coffee and quieter conversation, to wait. That is the shape of it, stripped bare. The men go inward to the center of the house and the center of the evening's real discussion. The women go outward to the drawing room, to the margin, to wait for the men to rejoin them when they are ready. It is dressed as delicacy, as a courtesy that spares the ladies the smoke and the coarser talk. And perhaps some evenings it is a relief to leave the table. But look at what it is beneath the dressing. The rooms of your day have been arranged, all of them, so that the places where things are decided are the places you are gently, courteously, absolutely kept out of. You may direct the whole machinery of the house and go in to dinner on a lord's arm and steer the talk of a dozen clever people for 2 hours together. And still, when the moment comes for the plain talk of the world, you rise and leave the room, and the door closes behind you, and you wait. In the drawing room, the women arrange themselves, and there is a different ease here, a loosening of one kind of performance and a tightening of another. Here the ranking still holds, but the talk can be warmer, more particular. The small currency of who is engaged and who is expecting, and whose daughter is coming out next season. You pour the coffee. You draw the shy young woman into the circle. You are, still and again, the conductor, keeping the half hour from going flat until the doors open and the gentlemen come through, a little louder than they left, and the evening reassembles itself into a single company for its last hour. You watch it all from the place you have held all day, the place that looks like the still center and is, in fact, the point of greatest labor. And somewhere beneath the coffee and the careful talk, you know, the way you know the weight of the corset without thinking of it, that the whole evening has proved the rule it was built to prove. It went beautifully. It went beautifully because you made it go. And it will be remembered, if it is remembered at all, as an evening that simply happened, gracious and easy, at the house of a charming couple, with no one much to thank for it. That is the rule. And tonight, as on every night, you have kept it perfectly. The gentlemen have their coats. There is the last flurry at the door, the search for a dropped glove, the low laughter of people who have eaten and drunk well and are pleased with themselves, the promises to call, the carriage wheels on the wet stones outside. You stand in the hall and say the right things one final time, and then the last door closes, and the house is yours again, and it is very late. For a moment you simply stand. The hall lamp burns low. Somewhere behind the green baize door, the staff are still moving, clearing the long table, carrying the glasses down, and you can hear the faint music of it, the chink of silver going back into its cases, a low word between the footman and the parlour maid, the cook's tread across the flagstones. That work will go on for another hour after you have gone up. You will not see the end of it. You never do. You gave the orders that set it in motion, and you will be asleep before it stops. You climb the stairs. Your feet ache in a way you have long since stopped noticing, the particular ache of a day spent upright and composed, and the banister is cool under your hand. The candle throws your shadow tall against the wall. In your room, the fire has burned down to a red heart in the grate, and the maid is waiting, drowsy and patient, to begin the last undoing of the day. And now it all comes apart, in reverse, in the same order it was built. This is the hour that answers the hour before dawn. And if you were watching yourself from somewhere outside your own body, you would see that the whole day has been a single garment put on and taken off, layer by layer, a construction assembled at first light and dismantled now in the dark. The jewels come off first and go back into their small, locked case. The earrings, the brooch chosen so carefully for its propriety, the rings, then the hair, the pins drawn out one at a time and dropped into a dish where they make a small sound like rain, and the whole heavy arrangement of the evening loosens and falls, and your head feels suddenly light and strange, as it does every night, as though a weight you had forgotten you were carrying has been set down. The dress next. The maid's fingers find the hooks down the back that you could never reach yourself, and the bodice loosens, and you step out of the skirts, and they are lifted away to be brushed and hung and mended where the hem has caught. Then the petticoats, one and then another, and then her hands are at the laces of the corset. And here is the moment that mirrors the morning most exactly of all. In the cold before dawn, she drew these laces tight, and you breathed out to let her, and your body was shaped and held and made upright for the world. Now she draws them loose, and the whalebone eases its grip, and you take the first full breath you have taken in 14 hours. It is an extraordinary feeling, that breath, and it is worth pausing on, because it is the truest physical fact of the whole day. All day the shape of you has been decided by something outside you. All day you have been held in a form that was chosen for you before you were old enough to choose anything. A form that says respectable, that says controlled, that says a woman who knows the rules and keeps them. And now, alone in your own room with the fire dying, that form is taken away, and you are simply yourself again, soft and tired and breathing, marked faintly where the boning pressed. And no one in the world is watching to see what shape you take when nothing holds you. The chemise last, and the nightgown drawn over your head, plain and warm, and the maid gathers the great heap of the day's clothing into her arms and asks whether you will need anything more tonight. You tell her no, You always tell her no. She is as tired as you are, and she must be up before you in the morning to begin it all again, to draw the laces tight before the light comes. She wishes you good night and goes, and you hear her step fade down the passage, and then the house is truly quiet, and you are alone with the low fire and the small circle of the candle, and the whole long day behind you. Let us be plain about that day now, at the end of it, while the room is quiet and no one is performing anything for anyone. You were extraordinary. That is the part that gets lost, and it is worth saying without softening it. From the dark before dawn to this hour, you ran a household, managed a staff, kept a budget to the shilling, composed the correspondence that held a whole web of relationships together, received and returned the calls that placed your family in its exact position in the world, dressed and undressed yourself twice into forms of near architectural complexity, steered a dozen conversations away from the rocks and back into open water, and produced, at the end of it, an evening of such apparent ease that everyone who attended it will remember it, if they remember it at all, as something that simply happened. There was real skill in that. There was judgment, memory, tact, endurance, an intelligence applied continuously and at high pressure to a set of problems that never fully resolved and began again every morning. You were good at it. You may even, in places, have loved it, the way anyone loves a thing they are good at. The small, clean satisfaction of a difficult thing done well. None of that is a fiction. Do not let anyone tell you the satisfaction was false or the competence imaginary. It was as real as the ache in your feet. But here is the other thing, and it must be held in the same hand as the first, not set against it, but beside it. Every ounce of that competence was spent inside a structure you did not build and could not leave, a structure that had decided, long before you, that the work you did all day was not work at all. The great rule beneath all the smaller rules, the one that the calling cards and the corset and the withdrawing after dinner all served, was that a woman of your class does nothing. That is the fiction the whole day exists to maintain. And so, the more skillfully you labored, the more completely your labor disappeared, because the entire point of doing it well was to make it look like nothing was being done. Success meant invisibility. The better you were, the less you were seen, and beneath even that lies the coldest rule of all, the one you touched earlier in the day when you thought about the account book and the law. None of it is yours. Not the house you ran so well, not the accounts you kept so carefully, not the standing you built call by call and dinner by dinner. It rests, all of it, every stone of it, on a single arrangement you entered before you knew what you were entering, and it holds only so long as that arrangement holds. You are the manager of an estate you cannot own, the author of a reputation credited to someone else, the keeper of a competence the law does not recognize you as possessing. If the ground shifted, if the marriage that underwrites everything were somehow to end, the whole structure would simply close over the place where you stood, and the skill of 30 years would count for nothing at all, because it was never counted in the first place. This is not a complaint against your life. Understand? It is not that you are unhappy tonight, sitting by the fire in your loosened hair. You may be quite content. Contentment and injustice can live in the same room, in the same person, on the same night, and pretending they cannot is its own kind of dishonesty. It is simply an observation about the shape of the thing, the strange and total set of rules you have lived inside all day, every day, since you were a girl learning your lessons in a nursery, not unlike the one down the passage where your own daughter sleeps tonight, learning already, without knowing it, the rules that will one day hold her exactly as they hold you. You rise from the chair. You draw the candle toward the bed. The fire is nearly out now. One last coal glowing and then dimming in the grate, and the room has gone cold at its edges. You lower the flame of the lamp until it is only a small blue bead of light, and then you let it go out altogether, and the darkness comes in soft and complete, and the house holds its breath. Somewhere below, the last of the silver is being set away. Somewhere above, the children sleep, and the governess sleeps, and the tired maid who will wake first of all sleeps too. And you lie down in the dark, in the shape your body takes when nothing holds it. And the day that will be remembered, as nothing releases you at last, into the 1 hour that asks no rules of you at all. Rest now. The evening went beautifully. You made it go. And whether or not the world ever knows it, you know it, here in the dark. And that will have to be enough. And perhaps tonight it is. Sleep well.